Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Andreas von Falck, a true giant in patent litigation and a partner here at Hogan Lovells. Andreas is one of the most highly acclaimed patent litigators with extensive experience in disputes, having advised many of the world's leading companies on patent litigation matters in Germany and across Europe. Andreas, great to have you with us on this cold and blustery December day in Dusseldorf.
Thank you very much for having me. It's very nice to have you here on our terrace. It is cold, but it's also really nice. I hope you enjoy the view.
Absolutely. Well, I think a lot of the audience would love to hear the background to your story, Andreas. We've spoken in the past how, your father, of course, was a renowned lawyer. You grew up immersed in the profession. You've previously spoken about breakfast table discussions to lunchtime legal quizzes with him as a child, and then, of course, latterly working alongside him for 6 years prior to his passing. But could you share that journey from those early influences through to working alongside him?
Sure, Julian. I will say, first of all, we were a very happy family. I have 3 younger siblings. And naturally, there were 4 children within 5 years. Everything was a competition, right? Whether it was for food at the breakfast, lunch, or dinner table, or running or whatever. I was always the oldest, so I was used to winning. But it was getting harder every year because in particular, my younger brother and my sister were starting to catch up with me. So it was in that spirit that we had our lunches, in particular, with our dad, where he was very keen on making sure that we knew everything that he knew. Mm-hmm. And so he spoke to us about his cases, which was sometimes interesting. And we had to repeat the chemical formulae that he had to learn by heart for his cases. And so we were challenging each other to learn these by heart even more quickly than the other. Also, a usual routine would be to get up and bring in the big dictionary. We had a German language dictionary and an English language dictionary, a very old edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Mm-hmm. And so whenever there was an open question, we would start look things up, like our children today are used to looking something up on the internet. Internet didn't exist, obviously, at the time. So, yeah, that was fun. And because of that, I think we were really used to thinking in sort of not legal terms, but in terms of how things are working, why do they work the way they work, and, are there alternatives? So in addition to actually learning things that are, right or wrong, we also learned to think. And I think that's one of the greatest blessings of my early youth is that exercise and constantly discussing, arguing your point, conceding when you're wrong and trying to get to the next level.
And were you all set on following your father's footsteps into law with that background?
Not at all. I wanted to be a psychologist all my life. And then at some time I wanted to be a carpenter. I was interested in gardening, but I didn't actually think of being a lawyer. After school, I trained at Deutsche Bank. Mm-hmm. And I realized that wasn't for me. And I developed a keen interest in being independent and self-employed. And I think that's the first time I actually started to think about how my father worked, as opposed to the way he was at home. He went to the office, but we had no idea what he was doing there. And so that whole concept of an independent workplace where you are your own boss started to mature around that time. And the next thing that became a big aim for me was sort of convert that psychology, dealing with other people, understanding what made people do the things they did, into a broader setting like sociology and then ultimately the law. And the first time that happened was when I did my military service after Deutsche Bank. And I ran into all sorts of issues with the law because the army is a highly regulated environment, and understanding what was okay and what was not okay became a real cause for me. That people started coming to me asking me for advice. I had an office job at the army, because of my training at Deutsche Bank. I was definitely suited for that, and they soon found out that I was good at organizing stuff. And then, I had regular consultation hours when my boss wasn't in the office, and other soldiers came to see me about their legal issues, and I realized that's actually quite a cool thing to do. It helped me with my desire to help other people, like a psychologist, but on a much more practical level and much more immediate.
Yeah. And when you decided upon that route into law, was it always destined that you would work, alongside your father, or what were the routes that you were considering?
I don't think I had any particular plans. At some point in time, I was really keen on working in the World Health Organization. I was fortunate enough to win a scholarship for a year in Geneva. The German Academic Exchange Service at the time had offered those scholarships, about, 15 or 20 or so. And a good friend of mine said, "Hey, we're going to apply for that." And I'm like, "Seriously?" And he said, "Come on, let's do this." And he organized everything, the whole application thing. We had to get 2 opinions from professors. And I remember when we went to see one of the professors, who was a famous guy, who was a member of the German Monopoly Commission. He was an economist and a professor of law, and we were in our second semester, and he made us take a test. And so after the conversation, he said, "You realize that you failed this test miserably, but I admire your courage." And he wrote some very favorable words in his opinion about the 2 of us, and we ultimately got that scholarship. So we went to Geneva. I loved the international environment, being able to speak in French and English and a little bit of Italian. People from America, from England. I shared a room with a PhD physicist who was doing a postdoc at CERN, who loved, Schubert Lieder and had a beautiful singing voice. He was a stutterer at the time. He's long overcome that. But, when he sang, he had the most beautiful voice, and he didn't stutter. And so it was all these amazing people that I met there. It was clearly an early beginning of realizing, or my own realization, how I loved working in international environments. And,
And I recall a few years ago, I was commending you on your English and indeed your accent, which you in turn were, putting down to your initial English kindergarten teachers, and that so-called Anglophilia. Looking forward, was that love for international or indeed English culture what led you to pursue the merger with Lovells, 20 plus years ago?
There are 2 stories around that. First of all, I was so fortunate to be able to go to an English language kindergarten, and this is based on my mum, who was at the age of 16 after the war sent to England, and it was appropriately greeted, as you can imagine. But she survived, and she made some really good friends, and she was keen that all of her kids would be able to speak a language fluently. She also sent me to France at the age of 15, where I was completely lost. I had to learn the language from the scratch. But that was a good start. At the time of the opportunity to merge with Lovells, it was really predominantly a commercial consideration. We came from a boutique firm environment. We were appeals lawyers, but the appeals bar in Germany had just been abandoned, so we had no clients. Our clients had previously been other lawyers. They now were able to do their own appeals, so we had to find something else. And as we thought about our future, the 5 partners that we were, we realized that we had huge success with international clients. We all spoke good English, and we thought that there was an opportunity in an international merger where other people would have relationships that we could then basically seize and develop.
Yeah.
And that's what happened.
And turning to this very unique profession in which we're in, patent litigation, if you consider both the technical and the legal requirements, what was it that, first of all, drew you to the field, perhaps apart from your father, but how do you then develop the ability to navigate both that legal and scientific side of the cases?
Again, there's 2 answers to that. First of all, is the natural answer that you get from anybody. We have to translate complex technical things into something that the judge can easily understand and enjoys reading. And judges will say, we rarely enjoy reading your submissions, but, secretly they love that job as well. And they're interested in reading about technical things. And then secondly, it's just my desire to be entertained at all times in my life. And I just love the diversity and variety of technical and science cases that come to us. Some more, some less, right? I mean, analyzing a standard essential patent is different from understanding the biology of a new cure for, cancer, depression, or you name it. But I've really loved all the cases that I've worked on. And like I said earlier on, I'm used to approaching things with a view to basically doing them and being able to capture all the complexity of a matter. And I'm also very competitive. I think that's a good thing to be in this job. You have to be very ambitious. And then the other thing that I like to say to myself is, if somebody else has done it, I can do it. That's how I got my driving license. I was really, really feared. I was in big fear of my driving exam, but I said other people have done it, and then school degrees, university degrees. And it's a good mindset. You look around you and think, like, if he can do it, I can do it. And that's how I've always approached these cases. My experience is, even if you don't understand a thing when you first look at it, there are ways of understanding things. Reading, talking to other people. And that's the other thing that's helped me a lot. Talking to other people. Picking up their view of things, not necessarily agreeing, but always giving them a chance to voice their views. Obviously, in the old days when I was, just a young associate, I would do more reading, whereas nowadays I have a very large group of people around me who understand science better than I do, and so that's the journey that I've learned to love.
Yeah, and there was a question later on that I was going to ask, but I think it segues nicely into that in terms of, when you're looking to divest or take responsibility, but of course you're then leaning on the team of patent attorneys, individuals.
Yeah.
How comfortable are you as the leader in giving away that sort of responsibility, and when do you step in or feel the need to step in per se?
I think that's the greatest question, Julian, because one of my total credos is that I'm never the best person, almost never the best person to do something. And also, if you want to be successful, commercially successful as a lawyer, there's a limit to how much work you can do. So delegation, sharing is the biggest credo in the way that I work. And I never come to a case saying that's a case I will do, or that's a case that somebody else or A, B, or C will do.
Right.
But we always sit down and try to understand the case first, develop a strategy, allocate roles, and then sometimes the client will say, Andreas, that's really a case that I think you should be arguing. And then sometimes the client would say, hey, I think other people at your firm are very well placed to do that, and potentially, can you get me so-and-so? And they're happy to know that I'm on the case, but not necessarily the person who does the writing or, coordinates everything. And sometimes I only come in around the time of the hearing with a lot of time to prepare, of course.
Right.
And sometimes I'll be involved right from the start, all along the way. It's really something that I'm very keen on talking to the client about in advance, so that there are no surprises. Like, I thought you'd do this case and now you're not here, or the other way around. I keep seeing 100 hours per month from you on the bill. Why does it have to be that expensive?
Right.
So it's a balance.
Yeah, because I was at a conference recently and there were a number of judges on one of the panels, and one of the judges said, we'd like to hear more from the associates during the trial, which I found, I imagine, quite an uncomfortable position, because often these cases are bet the company type situations where invariably they're paying you, Andreas, and or, partner, and where any mistake could be completely detrimental to the case. How do you balance that request when in reality the client ultimately wants to hear from you as that, first chair within the situation?
I'll tell you a story. I had a bacterial infection in my right ankle around the age of 20. It was very painful. In the end, I had to have surgery. And so my father and mother shopped around for the best doctor, and we found someone. And then when we got the invoice, they had written down hours and who did what, and the actual surgery was performed by an assistant doctor. I was like, oh wow, you didn't perform the surgery yourself. And he said, it's very simple, because he's much better at doing that than I am. And my contribution to that is that I know the people, I know whom to trust, and I can tell you who the best person for the individual job is, right? And it took me a while to come to terms with that, but that's exactly how I work today. Mm-hmm. And so I think here at Hogan Lovells, an associate will have a real chance at having their time in court, at arguing their cases. I will be there, but we will allocate parts of the case. Sometimes I won't say anything, although that's really hard for me. And sometimes I will do the entire hearing. But the premise is that we'll find out who's the best person to argue the case, and judges have commented on that and have said it's nice that you let the associates argue the case.
So going back to those associate days, was there a formative case early on in your career that really shaped how you lead teams or approach clients?
That's another interesting question. Let me think. In 2000, we had the first international case worth mentioning. It was a case of Cognis, a Dusseldorf-based chemical company that's now disappeared and merged into Bayer, actually. And they had a dispute with Goldschmidt, another German company, and we were representing Cognis, the defendants, and we filed a UK revocation action at the time, together with my colleague Stephen Bennett, who's still around, very good friend of mine, and we did everything ourselves because we had no teams. Imagine I sat at my desk in the year 2000, my new Lovells desk. It was empty. I had no cases, right? So we did a lot of marketing at that time, but we did everything ourselves. And just a couple of years later, another case, RIM versus Inpro. RIM were Research in Motion, obviously, the makers of the BlackBerry. They had gotten sued, and again, we had parallel litigation ongoing, and I was again about to do everything myself, and I had an associate who had previously been at another firm said, your case management really sucks, you know that? And I said, like, case management? And that was actually the first time I started thinking about case management, allocating roles to people, and it's become a bit of an obsession to make sure that these cases with now, sometimes 8 or 9 people on it, run smoothly, and you have predictable timing for the drafting of the submissions, etc. But that was my wake-up call, really, and it came from an associate.
Wow. And we talk about wake-up calls and formative cases, and of course, the nature of litigation is it's either win or lose, and of course, wins bring it with it satisfaction and relief, but of course, losses give you that sense of reflection and the what-ifs. Is there a case that you look back on and think, I'd like that back, I'd want to revisit that?
There's that one case, and I still wake up at night when I think about that case. It was just shortly after my father had passed away, and he was supposed to be the lead lawyer on the case. And then I think just about 3 weeks before the trial, the client came to me and said, I want to give you a try. Your father unfortunately isn't around anymore, but we've been thinking about it, and so you're going to lead the case. And it was 2001. It was the autumn of 2001. And I tried to prepare well for the case, but at the end of the oral hearing, a very experienced lawyer, Thomas Reimann, did sort of a legal, technical move where I had to react. And I reacted based on my gut feeling and just got the wrong end of the stick. And the case turned against the client. And there would have been an alternative thing that I could have done. And the one thing that has taught me, and that's been, again, another motto for the rest of my life, don't listen to your gut feeling when you're in the courtroom. But most importantly, there was a team. I could have talked to them. I could have said to the court, can we have a break? We need to think about this. And I didn't do that. And it's never happened to me again. Big learning, terrible situation for the client. But, the client there just said these things happen. And he was very, very kind. But of course, it was terrible.
Yeah.
For me, and I don't make mistakes normally.
And, evidently your father's been a huge influence on your career. But if you look at, let's say, within the courtroom, is there a present-day litigator that you faced on the opposing side that's really had a significant effect on your approach?
I want to say no, seriously, because I've always thought I'm my own man, right? Mm-hmm. I'm developing my own style. I know that I knew that I was never going to be my father, very authoritative, old school. My father had been a soldier in the war and, a completely different personality. I have a lot of the features of my mother, mm-hmm. A lot kinder, I guess, nicer in a way. And I've always tried to develop a style that I personally like. Mm-hmm. And that's not a copy of anything that I've seen in court. A couple of the key elements are I don't shout at court. I don't speak to the other lawyers in the courtroom. Mm-hmm. I always exclusively speak to the court. I try to pick up what the court really wants to say. I try to be responsive to the questions that the court asks. That sometimes leads to moments of awkward silence when I think. Mm-hmm. But I think, I hope that the courts appreciate that I'm really trying to get into a conversation, and I do odd things like saying to the court, I didn't get this. Can you repeat that for me? Or can you say it in different words? Because I really like to answer your question, but I'm not getting it. Yep. And always trying to make sure that you see the face of the judge and seeing whether they're interested or not. And when they're not interested, I say to the judge, I have a sense you're not interested. What can I do to get you interested in the case? So you engage the judges in the conversation. And that's my style. I like to say that's unique. Others have different styles, but no role model for that.
When you're preparing for that case, how much does the specific judge, shape your approach to that trial?
It's in Germany and at the UPC, it's oftentimes really the presiding judge who runs the hearing. But I always also try to take the perspective of the judge rapporteur, who's obviously written the opinion, which the presiding judge will oftentimes read out after 1 or 2 days of intense preparation. But there's also this judge rapporteur who sits there, doesn't say much, but looks at you all the time and will also lead the internal discussion when the judges get together. So these two really are the important people. I always try to find out who the judge rapporteur is, and then also obviously think about the characteristics of the presiding judge. But presiding judges in Germany are oftentimes quite similar. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes dominant personalities. And hard to convince. So in the end, you develop your arguments on the day, you develop your style on the day, depending on what you see in the courtroom. It's hard to prepare for any single one personality.
Right. So let's turn now towards the mindset, Andreas, because not only are you known for being an excellent litigator, you're evidently one of the key rainmakers as well. And I think within any profession, but especially in managed services and legal profession, there's always that balance to strike between winning the business and indeed, especially in litigation, winning the cases themselves. How do you build that mindset between having that balance between the win and indeed the result?
I think that people generally overestimate rainmaking. Rainmaking isn't a profession. It's part of doing a job well. Mm-hmm. And my approach to winning work is being in touch with my clients, talking to them about their legal issues, seeing them regularly face to face rather than just waiting for the next call. I think being top of mind in a competitive environment like ours with a lot of really, really good litigators in the marketplace, it's important that your clients remember you. And it's a mix of sort of speaking at conferences, of course, initially writing. I did a lot of writing, legal mm-hmm. writing when I was little. And then just making sure that you speak to the clients in the same way that I described speaking to the judges, really getting involved with what's on their mind, as opposed to going to see a client and talking about an abstract legal issue. I've had the best conversations with clients when we were just sitting face to face over dinner or in a meeting room, talking about things that really kept them awake at night. Understanding their personal circumstances is really important. They're human beings just like you are, and there's a type of client that I'm successful with, and then there's a type of client that I'm unsuccessful with. And ultimately, it's what a senior partner at Finnegan Henderson told me when I was a very young lawyer and a visiting associate at Finnegan Henderson. He said, "People do things for people." It's as simple as that, Andreas. And it's been true all my life as a lawyer.
Yeah. Because I was going to follow up that with, what would be your advice to a young lawyer aspiring to be both rainmaker and indeed excellent lawyer? But it sounds as if both humility, authenticity, and I guess versatility in that regard are the key attributes in any profession.
A keen interest in your job, right? People can tell whether you like your job or not.
Yep.
And when you get excited, when your face lights up when you talk about your profession, people notice that. Yep. But I'll tell you another little story. In 2005, I got a call from the managing partner at Lovells at the time, whether I wanted to take a senior executive role. I had been the head of IP at the firm for 2 years, but there was a change in administration, and David Harris called me at the time if I wanted to be on the International Management Committee and do a role that did involve IP, but also a couple of other areas. One of them was real estate. And then later in 2005, I came to London to do annual reviews for my partners in the real estate group. And the head of the group was, retirement age in London at the time, about 56, 57, Bob Kidby. He said, "What on earth are you doing here? Interviewing me about what I do for a living, right? You know nothing of real estate." And I said, "Yes, that's right. And I'm keen to learn from you," right? And then we got into a really interesting conversation about how he went about winning business. And he said, the key to winning business is to be known by everyone. Even your worst enemies need to know you and say that you're perhaps a reasonable practitioner. And then when people talk about you, or when people talk about the business, they talk about you. It's important that whenever somebody says, "Do you know a good real estate lawyer?" Your name is on that list of 3 or 4 people.
Right.
And I learned a lot from that conversation, and I made sure that everybody who spoke about patent litigation, had my name in that list of 2 or 3 people. And it involved so much speaking at conferences. I can't recount the number of conferences that I've been at. One thing that I say for myself is when I'm at a conference, I speak. I don't listen.
Yeah.
And I think that was a key to getting well known and becoming one of the names that people regularly recount or cite when it's about patent litigation. Yeah, I was a member of the International Bar Association. I became a member of the IBA in 2002. I was a head of the patent committee that gave me exposure to a lot of international patent litigators. And to this day, I get calls from people from Canada or Australia who I met at IBA and they say, "I have a case, are you available?"
Yeah, and I think, 3 decades almost within the profession, a question I would always have in that sort of situation is, what still sparks that excitement? Is it, a new case? Is it the nascence of the UPC and being able to participate from the very outset? What still keeps you going, Andreas?
Like I said at the outset, Julian, it's the diversity of cases, the evolution of medicine and its reflection in patent litigation is absolutely amazing. And, I've done a lot of SEP cases, a lot of, engineering cases, bathroom carpets, etc. But it's the biology, the chemistry in life sciences that really keeps that energy up. And, ironically, a lot of my friends who have a disease come to me and say, "I've been given this or that medication. Do you think that's right?" And that's how I look at it. My mom was a doctor, and so I have this interest in medicine
Yeah.
And that's probably the one thing that keeps me going.
Yeah. And as you said, I mean, in any role, passion is critical, right? I mean, for me, I love what I do. It doesn't feel like a job, and consequently why no 2 days feel the same, and it doesn't feel like a chore. And I think that's key in any situation. And you've always struck me as someone who ultimately both loves the role, but actually loves the team environment and that competition that you had even as an early child, which I think is critical.
Yeah. I don't think that I would be where I am today had I not been able to work with other people. Yeah. I'm not very good at working on my own. From my early days in law school, I've been working in teams, and I think I can contribute things to teams. I can identify quite well what will take the case forward and then bring things together, synthesize a case from the many different contributions, weed out what's, intelligent and clever, but perhaps not easily understandable, try to find the better argument, try to make the submission even shorter. I've learned a lot from a Japanese client who was an engineer, not even a patent attorney or a lawyer, who said, I want you to reduce those 30 pages to 10 pages, otherwise I won't give you approval for filing. And it's amazing how you can reduce something that's 30 or 40 pages long to 10 pages, and it's a better work product.
Right. So everyone sees, Dr. Andreas von Falck, the professional individual, but, I think everyone's always interested in that sort of behind the scenes aspect as well. And, at your level of success, it's easy for that professional side to take over. How do you keep sight of yourself, the husband, the father, the person, while still leading at such a high level in the firm? And are there any boundaries or habits which have helped you protect that balance?
Oh, man. I think I had to find out about the limits, and I have a lot of limits. I didn't used to realize those, though. I had a period in 2017, 2018 when I wouldn't say clinically depressed, but I wasn't feeling very good. And at that time, we had a coaching session for the management team at the firm. And my coach said, okay, you sound like, after the first meeting, you sound a bit sad and not very happy. So do you want to tell me why you think that is? It's like the typical psychologist, right? Okay, you say this, why do you think that is so? And at the end of the session, it was very clear that I had to do something else in my life. I had to quit management, which I did during a transitional period of a couple of months. I just left management, went back to practice. That was the first time I realized, it's not the sky that's the limit, but there are built-in limitations. And at that time, I also realized that I hadn't seen my family enough, and that was another thing that I was really missing. And so I changed my life, and I set up a routine whereby almost each morning, obviously I'm not a machine, but oftentimes in the morning, I take about half an hour just to think about the week, the month, the year, and what is a realistic thing to do, and what is perhaps something that I can remove off my calendar. Mm-hmm. And that's been a very good routine to regularly weed out your obligations and say, that's not something I really have to do or that I want to do, and then tell people exactly that. And they are usually a lot more understanding than you think.
Spending a December day on the terrace up here in Dusseldorf.
Without a warm blanket.
Exactly.
Or a Glühwein. Exactly. And so, we may talk a little bit more about the family, but I think I couldn't have done all this without my wife. It's a commonplace to say that, but we've had a very long relationship. Been together since 1991. We love each other dearly. There's never been a question about that. Mm-hmm. And that gives you such a rock-solid foundation for everything else that you do. Mm-hmm. And a good friend of mine, Burkhard Göbel, who is a very successful trademark lawyer here at the firm, he says that there are three things that can derail a career: death, drugs, and drink. And it's really true. If you want to live at that level of challenge, you have to live a healthy life. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you forget about that. But when you turn 40, maybe 45, you start thinking about these things a lot more. And I can be very, very disciplined, like, not drink when other people are drinking, do my exercise when I don't feel like it, or prepare for a hearing when I really have other things on my mind. And that's been something that I've also applied to my private life. So when there is something in the family, it has my undivided attention, and I'll just drop all the work stuff and let other people do it. And that's something I really had to learn. Like I said at the outset, I wasn't very good at it. I feel I'm a lot better at it right now.
Mm-hmm. And it, obviously from your side, particularly beneficial. How has your wife managed this over the last 30 years? I'm sure the hours are significant. Your travel is significant. You've got children as well.
Yeah. Nina is a very clever person, and she studied history of the arts, German, and general history, and she has a lot of hobbies. She gets along on her own. That's the one thing. She says, like, okay, you don't stay at home because you think I might be alone. I won't be alone. I'll take care of myself. Number one. Number two. She's very good at grounding me. She doesn't take me very seriously. And she will tell me, that's your job. I respect that. But, there are other obligations that you have, like, I don't know, feeding the dog or looking after the garden. And that's also important. And spending time with your children and taking me out for dinner. And she makes sure that I take these things as seriously as my job. And that when I make time, I'm there 100%, like I said. So, and that, like I said, the unconditional love helps a lot. We look at each other, we smile, and we feel good.
Yeah. And you talk about being present and 100% there.
Yeah.
Is that to say that you turn the phone off or park it? How do you have that work-life balance, so to speak?
That's a touchy subject, the phone. Ever since the fax went away and we had Blackberries, I think that's been a recurring issue, and I think it must be an issue for everyone. Yeah. Just turning off the phone doesn't work, because the way I work means that sometimes I have calls at midnight, because I'm a client person. I think that client service is just like when you go to a restaurant or you go to a bank or an insurance broker. You want to be treated like you're the only client, and that involves responding quickly to email. But I don't usually do emails on the weekends.
Okay.
And I'll be certain to have an out of office on when I'm not actually available, so that there's always clear communication. And I do write to my clients when I want to be left alone during holiday. Clients respect that when you tell them in advance. What they don't like is when you just disappear and are unavailable. Yeah. And so, that's a complex answer to a simple question. And I do keep my phone on at night.
No, look, I think it's relevant for all of us. I'm particularly guilty of being always on, so to speak, and being able to disconnect and be present at home is something I certainly struggle with. And I've always looked at you as being the sort of benchmark in that sense.
It's not a 9-to-5 job, Julian. We know that. And I think you can treat it as a 9-to-5 job, and then you're being treated like a 9-to-5 lawyer.
Yeah. So let's look forward. When the day does come to hang up the gowns, what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind, both within your firm and indeed the broader legal community?
I think it's the work style primarily. And I'll say something grand right now. I've been influenced by Karl Popper and the concept of critical rationalism, and it's encapsulated in a single sentence. Every decision becomes better by running it by another person. That's one thing. The other philosopher, if you will, is Emmanuel Levinas, a Lithuanian-born French philosopher, who's developed the concept of alterocentrism. It's not really an English word, but it's about putting the other person first and not thinking about situations from your own perspective, but from the perspective of the other. That's what alterocentrism is primarily about, getting satisfaction in life from other people's well-being. And I get huge satisfaction out of being with my team, with my family, with my friends. and trying to figure out what's good for them, what can I do for you rather than what can I do for myself, is what I want people to remember me for. And that critical rationalism, really not thinking that you have the answer, but thinking that there's always another better answer that comes out of running things by another person.
And when that time does come, will you miss the law? I mean, have you considered what life looks like beyond?
Julian, I've never been a particularly good lawyer, and I won't miss the law. I'll miss the days in court.
Yeah.
I will certainly miss the intellectual challenges at times. But there are so many other things we can all do. I once spoke to a lawyer whom I had to retire, who was 68 in the New York office, and he said, "Andreas, I really have nothing else to do." And I said, "My God, that's very sad. Let's think about other things you can do. What else did you do when you were young?" He said, "I used to play the guitar. I really liked it. I sang in a rock band." I said, "What on earth stops you from resuming that?" He said, "I haven't done it in 40 years." But that's the sort of thing that comes out through conversations. And again, the guy has picked up his guitar since. For me, there are so many things I want to do. It's not just traveling and being in exotic places. I want to run an advisory office for young people who are in trouble, whether it's their school careers or having had encounters with law enforcement. Maybe I've already started discussing with my church community whether I can have a room there and maybe a little sign outside. Services of all kinds. But it's not the practice of law. It's converting what I've learned over more than 30 years of professional life into something that's useful for people who don't have access to that kind of conversation usually. Who knows? Maybe another 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Who knows? But that's one of the things that I can get really excited about. I want to do a lot of hiking. It's one of the things I love most is hiking in the mountains or anywhere else actually. So I'll do a lot of that as long as I can walk. Hopefully, many more decades. So there are many projects, but they'll be more concrete as that time comes closer.
Yeah. Is there anything that you won't miss?
Deadlines and time recording.
Right.
Time recording has really been the thing that has made my life as a lawyer the most miserable, I think.
Yeah. Well, look, Andreas, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you. And apologies for giving you pneumonia out here on your terrace.
Same for you, Julian. I think we all need a cup of tea.
I think a nice glühwein, etc., would be a wonderful end to this. But I really appreciate your time as always, Andreas. Always a pleasure. And hope you and the family have a wonderful Christmas season.
Same to you, Julian. And thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak about myself. I don't do that very often.